This is LibreQuest. My name is Matt. It is the 11th of February, 2020. The first article that I have today is from 9to5linux.com. This article is written by Marius Nestor, posted on the 10th of February. Mate 1.24 desktop environment released with new apps and many improvements. A new major release of the lightweight Mate desktop environment has been released today. Mate 1.24, which brings numerous improvements and updates across many core components and apps. Almost a year in development, the Mate 1.24 desktop environment introduces the ability for users to hide certain applications during startup, adds support for NVMe drives in the System Monitor panel applet, and improves support for high DPI displays for control centers icons. If you would like to read the rest of this article, or the other two articles I'm going to be reading, I will link those up in the description wherever this episode is posted, and that is LibreQuest.org. It's also on archive.org and on brighteon.com for the video version. The next article is from ZDNet. This article written by Stephen J. Von Nichols. It was posted on the 10th of February. South Korea's government explores move from Windows to Linux desktop. In what may prove to be the biggest migration from Windows to the Linux desktop, the South Korean government is looking into shifting from Windows 7 to a trio of Linux desktops. With Windows 7 on its support coffin, some institutions are finally giving up on Windows entirely. The biggest of these may be the South Korean government. In May 2019, South Korea's Interior Ministry announced plans to look into switching to the Linux desktop from Windows. It must have liked what it saw. According to the Korean news site Newsis, the South Korean Ministry of Strategy and Planning has announced the government is exploring moving most of its approximately 3.3 million Windows computers to Linux. And finally, the historical article for today is from the Linux Journal. This article was written by John Mad Dog Hall, and it was posted on February 5th, 2008, but it was about an event that was hosted today in 2008, February 11th. And this article is titled Florida Linux Show. February 11th, 2008 will see the Florida Linux Show, FloridaLinuxShow.com, a one-day event aimed at business people and systems administrators who are trying to learn about the latest in free and open source trends. The event will be held at the University of North Florida University Center at Jacksonville, and the admission charge is $10. Starting at 0800 hours, that's 8 a.m. for Windows users, and ending at 1700 hours, that's 5 p.m., the event is quite packed with things to do. Even with the event's 3 simultaneous tracks, it is impossible to talk about all of FOSS in one day, but the organizers have a broad scope of current major topics such as virtualization, IPv6, Linux phones, embedded Linux, and of course security. The closest thing to an introductory talk is Don Corbett's Installing Linux for New Users, and I have the feeling that even old-timers might pick up a few tips from Don. So the main topic today that I wanted to address is an article. I'm sorry, it was actually a blog post more than an article, but it was posted over on kate-editor.org. Now, I've been a Kate text editor, and that is the KDE Advanced Text Editor for the KDE desktop, and the K desktop environment, or known as KDE or Plasma, is the newest iteration of the KDE desktop. But I've been using this editor for a long time, and in fact, my very first distribution, which was Mandrake 7.2 back in 2001, I think. It was 2001, around then. And it was, I don't know if it was called K-Edit at the time, but either way, it was present in the distribution. So I've been using Kate for, I would assume, that long, because I've done web development since the year 2000, and I actually started doing web development on a Windows 98 machine, I do believe. Okay, so this article is about the telemetry/user feedback that is going to be optional in the upcoming version 20.04. So the blog post says, starting with the upcoming 20.04 release or current master branch builds, Kate allows the user to turn on some telemetry submission. This is a purely opt-in approach. We will not submit any data if you do not actively enable this feature. So that is good. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to reach out to Christoph Cullmann. And Christoph, thank you. And he was kind enough to take the time to answer some questions that I had. Now, I did ask him if he would be interested in an interview, but I understand how busy life is. I really understand. So let me move over to those questions. And again, Christoph, thank you for being so candid and being so gracious to answer these questions. So the first question I have is, let's say I'm unfamiliar with telemetry data and have not read the telemetry policy of the CATE project. How would you describe the process? Christoph's answer was, if you opt in to the telemetry submission, you allow the application to transfer some statistics about how you use our application to our KDE's servers. We guarantee that we do not uniquely identify you and will not transmit more stuff than we show you in the dialog you can opt in with. You will benefit by providing us, the developers, with a bit more ideas about how our stuff is used. So my second question, in what ways can you see the collected data being used in future development of the CATE project? Christoph's answer, for example, is high DPI a thing for our users? Or are high DPI screens still only used by a minority? Do we need to care about dual head setups? Do new versions arrive at our users at all? Or are they, for example, in 2022, still stuck with the first version from 2020? Do people use this stuff at all? For example, BSD, or is only Linux important for the Unixes? So my third question, how was the decision made to include the telemetry functionality opt-in service in CATE? And Christoph's answer, we get telemetry for the stuff we distribute via the Windows Store if people have enabled the telemetry in their Windows settings. Even alone, the installation statistics and usage counts show that, for example, we get some higher adoption on Windows with each new version we publish. This both motivates and shows, oh, bad, the last update is no longer used. Something went wrong. So my fourth question, how is the data transferred from the user system to your servers, and how often? So Christoph responded with once a week over HTTPS to telemetry.kde.org. Now, HTTPS is hypertext transfer protocol, but it's secure, meaning that there's encryption between your system and the server system. So my fifth question, I opt in to share my telemetry on machines running Ubuntu. Do you think that telemetry services are becoming the status quo for free software projects? And Christoph's answer, I think they get more and more common. Without any such feedback channel, you really are lacking a lot of knowledge about your user base. For example, you can try to focus your development efforts on areas that will make the most of your users happy. At the moment, you just have the bug tracker or mailing list / forums as feedback. But for example, some high DPI bug really, I'm sorry, let me try this again. I don't want to mess up the responses here. But is, for example, some high DPI bug really more important compared to some dual head issue? Without a bit of information of what is used in the wild, this is hard to judge. All right, my last question. What would your response be to someone who would criticize the decision to include the opt-in telemetry data? In Christoph's response, it's opt-in, nobody is forced to turn it on. It's a bit like somebody complains, why is this plugin bundled? My natural response would be, who cares if it's default off? If you really distrust it is open source, patch it out and compile your own version. Though I really would appreciate if, for example, distributions or package managers don't do that and give the users the choice to decide themselves. So that was our correspondence there. And again, I really appreciate Christoph's responses to my questions. And the thing is, the answers make a lot of sense. And I really think that it brings a lot of clarity to why telemetry is important and if it's secure, if it's private. if your privacy is being respected. And I do believe it is. For, you know, there are some statistics that may concern somebody. It may not, but it's opt-in, and that's the thing. And you really can compile your own version. Now, the argument of not having a package maintainer or a distribution do it by default, I think that is a very, that's another important discussion to have, because is that removing the option for somebody who wants to really help refine a project that they're interested in, or maybe that they even contribute to, or that they make some sort of maybe even a financial contribution to that project? Is that removing their ability to do that by default? Have the option to do telemetry by default from their repositories? Yeah, that would be. Now, could they grab the package and compile it themselves with the telemetry option enabled? Sure. I mean, it could work in reverse. But I would think on that if a distribution did want to do that, that it would be a wise move to, it would make more work and have two packages to maintain, but they could have two options, one without the telemetry option by default and one with an unmodified version. That would be my thought on that. Now, as far as the telemetry data all around, my thoughts on it are kind of that it really comes down to the individual's tolerance. And what I mean is, let's say you drive someone's car that and they say, here's the thing. When you start the car, you have to jiggle the keys a certain way to get it to start. Well, that's not how it's supposed to work, and so do they, right? But they're willing to tolerate that about the vehicle. They're not going to complain about it. Now, if they have a flat, they're probably going to take the car and get the flat fixed, or maybe fix it themselves, right? Because this is open source we're talking about. So they may fix it themselves, or they may take it and complain and say this needs to be fixed. It goes beyond their tolerance. And it's the same with software. There may be bugs that people tolerate, but it's not performing the way it's supposed to. And I think that's one reason that telemetry is important for developers. And I personally opt into giving up my telemetry data, and and it's not like it's not secure. I feel confident that if it's transferred over HTTPS once a week, I'm fine with that, and I really feel like it's going to be beneficial in the long run for the project. And I think the way that it's being implemented is, the best way that it can be implemented. Okay, I think that's about it for the show today. Again, thank you, Christoph, so much. It's really cool that you took the time to answer my questions. And and as well, Christoph asked if he could post my questions and his answers on the blog post there on the main project website and link to the podcast. I said, absolutely, that's great. So hopefully that'll bring in some more people that find the things I find interesting, that they'll find the podcast interesting as well, because I really enjoy talking about the stuff I talk about, and I'm kind of hoping to bring in some more people, because it's nice to converse with people that enjoy the same things you enjoy. So anyway, until next time, this has been LibreQuest.